welcome. Gonna go ahead and get started. We'll have a few more people filing in as we get started today, but we're glad to have you all here for our monthly La Mesita webinar. Today's webinar is titled Connect, Coordinate, and Collaborate, Working with Attorneys to Serve Survivors of Human Trafficking and Other Traumas in the Latino Community. Presented by Libby Magee Coles, Esquire, and Charissa Gray. So one of the reasons why we're having this webinar is January is National Slavery and Human Trafficking Prevention Month. So we're really, oh, hey, Roger. So we're really glad to have this opportunity to share this wonderful information with you all. I think you'll find that the presentation today will be interactive as usual, as is our style, but also chock full of resources. And we've actually compiled that into a PDF full of links for folks to take away from today's presentation. And we'll be sharing that through as we get into the presentation today. So we always encourage, like we said, interaction. I know we're all distant and virtual, but we really want this to be a conversation, not really a didactic where we're talking at you. So there'll be times throughout the presentation. I think Libby and Charissa have been gracious in allowing for conversation and questions to come along. I think there'll be natural pausing places for Q&A, but folks can also, you can also, if you have a question, you don't want to forget about it later, then you can always type it in the chat and I will try to ask the question of our presenters for you. So, but really our preference is for people to unmute. Also, if you feel comfortable to turn your video on, that helps me to figure out if someone wants to say something, and it helps to see faces in our audience. So if you feel comfortable, please turn your video on, and also please feel free to take care of yourself. And if you don't feel comfortable, don't turn your video on. A reminder for our Futura staff who might be on the call, if you are taking credits for today, just a reminder to log out of Paychecks right now, and we'll give a reminder to log back in. So I want to say a big thank you to Greensboro AHEC, whom we partner with to provide the continuing education credits for today. So you all should have registered through Greensboro AHEC to be here. You'll receive a survey after today from Greensboro AHEC, and once you complete that, they will send you your continuing ed credits. So please do that. It takes about 5 minutes, and it really helps us. We really appreciate any feedback, written feedback you can give on those. And then I think our presenters also appreciate feedback as well. So if you can take some time to write a few things, we really appreciate it. Also want to share this with folks. We have a few slots left still for our virtual 3-day intensive training. It's April 9th through the 11th with Dr. Edna Foa, who is the creator of Prolonged Exposure, which is an evidence-based treatment for trauma. So our registrations are open. Sophia will be putting the link for this in the chat for you all. Typically folks have to pay around $1,600, go to Pennsylvania to train with Dr. Foa, but she'll be beaming in with us, and I think it's only $250 that we're able to, thanks to grant funding, able to provide this at a more reasonable price. So if you're interested, please follow that link that will be coming on the chat shortly and sign up. So I'm going to introduce our speakers for today. So we have Libby Magee Coles and Charissa Gray. So Libby is the executive director of JusticeMatters, which she helped found in 2009. She is the appointed chair of the North Carolina Human Trafficking Commission when it was created in 2013, and served in this role through 2019. And she speaks and trains regularly across North Carolina as well as nationally. So she'll be providing the legal side of today's presentation, and Charissa providing the behavioral health side. So she's the Chief Program Officer of JusticeMatters, specializing in trauma-informed and holistic service provision. and she has worked with rural, urban, and international settings with domestic, US, and foreign national children, youth, and adults dealing with issues of human sex and human trafficking in general. So big welcome to Charissa and Libby. We're glad to have you all here. Folks can give a wave or a clap or something. It kind of sucks that we can't have any audio from the audience, but we have a few quick polls that we're going to put up for folks. So these will pop up on your screen. If you can just respond to the best of your ability. There'll be some options where you can clarify in the chat if the answers you need to give aren't on the screen. This will just give our presenters an idea of who's here for this presentation. So the first one is, where are you located? You have a little map to guide you here about where your location might fit in the different denominations. So if you can select that and hit submit, and we'll give it about 30 seconds or so, and then Sophia will publish the results. Okay, I think we can probably publish. All right, so a nice spread. We've got everything covered. And then we got someone from NYC, from Wilmington. Very nice. St. Paul, Minnesota, nice. Wow. Fort Mill, South Carolina. All right. And the next one is, what best describes your discipline and position? So if you'll select one of those. We have someone from Texas. All right, I think we can publish. Oops. So a lot of social workers, mental health counselors, but again, a nice spread across everything. We love to see that. ESL counselor, Leslie Jones, juvenile justice counselor, attorneys, military. Always love to see the range of folks that join us. All right, and then the last couple here are more specific to our presentation today. So have you worked with a victim survivor of human trafficking? We put the third option there because you might have suspicions, but you maybe haven't confirmed it or you're not sure. You have some folks that are working in foster care, internal med. Oh, so a pretty even split there. Some folks that have, a lot more that haven't, and some that are unsure. And then finally, have you ever received a training on how to work with victim survivors of human trafficking? That's just a simple yes, no. And this again is just to give our presenters some context as to who's on the call today, and the level of experience or exposure to this information. And I think we can probably publish. Wow, dead even split. Excellent. All right. Well, I think those were all the polls we had. Yep. So I will unshare now, and Libby, I will turn it over to you to share and get us going.
Great, thanks, Juan. All right, let me see if I can manage this here. All right, can you all see my screen?
Nope.
Oh, it's because I need to hit share.
There we go.
Okay, you good?
I think so.
Excellent. Okay, did it advance?
Yes, you're good.
Perfect. All right, y'all, I'm an attorney, but I'm no tech expert, so I appreciate your patience. As Juan said, I'm Libby Coles. It is an honor to be with you here today. I'm joined by Charissa Gray. And we are just glad to be at the table with you. I gotta figure out my, I'm gonna move this over. Yes, thank you. Thank you for inviting us to pull up a chair and join you at the table today. It really, truly is an honor to be here to talk, share, and learn with you. Okay, there we go. Justice Matters. So I wanted to start by giving you just a little background on who we are and what we do. We are a nonprofit legal service provider in Durham, and we address the roots and repercussions of human trafficking in North Carolina by providing both direct services and working at the systemic level to promote just policies and practices. And our vision is to see the freedom and flourishing of all. We believe that immigrants without permanent legal status in the United States and children without the security of an adult who's committed to their care and survivors of trauma are at higher risk of human trafficking and other forms of victimization and re-victimization. And as lawyers, we believe that legal status and legal security are foundational protections against these injustices. And when delivered according to a trauma-informed care or a trauma-informed approach, that we can join you, with you, create opportunities for our clients to heal, to flourish, and to pursue their dreams. And on behalf of our entire team at Justice Matters, I want to acknowledge each of you, each member of La Masita on the call today. Really believe that your work is important, that it's vital to the flourishing and the holistic well-being of the clients we see. We really believe it takes a village, and I will be the first to say that I and the entire legal profession have a lot to learn from you as a behavioral health field. At a personal level and professional, I'm really deeply grateful for the opportunity I've had over the past 10 years to learn from Carla Sue, who was the former clinical director at El Futuro, as well as Dr. Luke Smith and the entire El Futuro team here in Durham. I still remember the first time I connected with Carla about 10 years ago about a mutual client, a survivor of human trafficking. And it really was Carla who opened my eyes to the reality that the way we as attorneys provide legal services, not just the legal results we secure or the legal rights we protect, holds potential to promote restoration and potential to re-traumatize, to derail and disrupt a client's healing process. They do not teach attorneys about trauma in law school. So our work together with El Futuro here and then many others in your profession have really laid the foundation for our commitment here at Justice Matters to uphold principles of trauma-informed care in our work. So let's get started. Charissa and I are here today to equip you to better identify and respond to Latinx survivors of human trafficking. Clients you're seeing or serving who were trafficked in their past might be in a trafficking situation presently or are at heightened risk of being trafficked. We want to help you be able to better describe key legal options, not so that you can explain the law to your clients, but that so you as a behavioral health professional can understand the legal options that might be helpful to your client and point them in the direction of getting legal services that would prevent re-victimization and promote their well-being. And thirdly, we want to help promote more effective ethical collaboration between behavioral health professionals and attorneys for the good of our mutual clients. We really want this to be as helpful and practical as possible. So we're going to close with a case study and do our best to save time for Q&A at the end as well. I am cognizant that the material we cover today might be difficult for you. Maybe you or a loved one has been impacted by human trafficking, or you're struggling with vicarious trauma or burnout. And so please do what you need to do to take care of yourself today on the call. And I do honor survivors of human trafficking at this table today.
Thank
All right,
you,
Charissa.
Thanks, Libby. So a couple of things, since we have about half of the group that has been trained in human trafficking and half who is not. So we want to just make sure that we have a general understanding about the terms we'll be using today. So first of all, when we're talking about human trafficking, we are going to start from the legal definition of human trafficking. And Libby is going to unpack this a little bit more later, but just wanted to make sure we all have that common understanding. And also to make sure it's really clear that we are speaking as legal service providers, or in my case, behavioral health professionals that work with legal service providers. And we really know that human trafficking plays out in many different ways across all different cultures. So we all have a lot to learn. And so we'll be speaking specifically from our context with serving within Durham and the Triangle area in North Carolina. And a lot of we'll try to be careful to denote when it's a federal law or a state law, since we have some people that are coming from outside of North Carolina as well. And as Libby said, we're going to try to be practical. So we do encourage you, we'll have certain moments when we'll really invite you to answer specific questions in the chat. But if there's things that come up throughout this time that you'd like to share, please do put that in the chat. And if we can go to the next slide, Libby. So the other thing is that we're being intentional today to use the term victim survivor. And you'll see an excerpt here from the Federal Strategic Action Plan on services for victims of human trafficking. And so we're using victim survivor because state and federal laws generally use the term victim instead of survivor as a legal term. But then using the survivor term is a terminology that some individuals who have been trafficked prefer to identify as. So we're using both as a way to acknowledge the legal implications that exist within human trafficking and as a way to honor survivors of human trafficking. And if we can go to the next slide. So as you're looking and learning about human trafficking, you may have seen the term, including one of the resources that we shared, use the term modern day slavery. But what we are going to be careful to use in our presentation today is we will be using the term human trafficking. And we're intentionally not using the term slavery or any variants, including modern day slavery, to describe human trafficking, because there's critical differences between human trafficking and chattel slavery. And you'll see some of that laid out in this slide. And we really desire to honor survivors of chattel slavery and their descendants in the US today. And so there's one of the resources in the handout is a human trafficking prevention toolkit through NC CASA. And they talk about that more. So I would encourage you to look at that handout and just consider that as we continue to move forward. We can go to the next slide. And so the last thing we just wanted to note is the pandemic, as in everything, has really shifted and changed many things when we think about identifying victim survivors of human trafficking, serving them, working to prevent human trafficking in the first place. And we're still learning a lot about what has happened to shift and change. So a lot of the information, a lot of the statistics we're sharing are those that were true before the pandemic. And we'll try to mention some of the ways that we do know that the pandemic has shifted things, but really want to acknowledge that this is definitely a learning in process situation. And so know that we do know that for sure the pandemic has created difficulties in identification and access for services. And so we're very thankful today to be talking with you all because we see the behavioral health profession as a really key service industry right now that might be able to help victim survivors of human trafficking.
All right, so why this training matters. Really do come to you today with a spirit of wanting to share and dialogue so that we can promote better outcomes for our clients. So we're here because of our clients and our mutual clients and your clients. For us as professionals, to promote more effective working relationships between our professions, and then for our communities, human trafficking affects us all as it affects our neighbors. Really do believe that we're interconnected and that we have a responsibility to be aware. I have a responsibility to be aware of the ways I am complicit and to take action. All right, so our first objective here, identification and response. And I'm going to start with a human trafficking overview. Hopefully this isn't new, but I think it's important foundation to lay for our time together today. So this is a heat map As you might be aware, the National Human Trafficking Hotline is in operation, based in DC, and it operates this hotline throughout the US. They have provided information. It's really the best data set we have on human trafficking, is the data that they've gleaned coming out of calls and texts into their hotline. They don't have the data out yet for 2020, but here's the 2019 data. So this is the best data set I can point you to. They identified over 11,000 cases involving 22,000 victims, survivors in the United States in 2019, and really do believe this is only a small subset of the cases in the US, as many are reported to other hotlines or local agencies, or are undetected, misidentified, overlooked, or ignored. So this really is a data showing incidence, not prevalence. In North Carolina, our hotline data in 2019, there were just over 1,200 contacts with the hotline made coming out of North Carolina, and 266 cases reported in 2019 involving over 500 individuals. And again, likely only a small subset of cases in North Carolina. So what is human trafficking? Fundamentally, at Justice Matters, we look at it as a human rights violation. So it's a violation of an individual's basic rights and personal freedom. It is a crime at the federal level and in all 50 states. In general, our human trafficking law in North Carolina does align with federal law, in that a minor who's involved in any sort of commercial sexual activity is by statute a victim of human trafficking. So if you hear the term child prostitute, there is no such thing. A child is by statute a victim. Adults induced into commercial sexual activity through force, fraud, or coercion, and then children and adults who are induced into the provision of labor or services through force, fraud, or coercion are by statute victims of human trafficking. I'm gonna try to not nerd out on the legal side, but give you some tools that will be helpful. As a lawyer, it's really helpful for me to think about human trafficking in terms of action, means, purpose. And so this slide actually is relevant to everyone on the call. It's based on the federal human trafficking law, the Trafficking Victims Protection Act of 2000, which has been reauthorized multiple times since. It is our comprehensive federal law in the US addressing human trafficking. So when you think about action, means, purpose, a perpetrator of human trafficking takes one or more of these actions through one or more of these means for one or both of these purposes. And as a behavioral health professional, I think the most important aspects to focus on as you engage with your clients are the means and the purpose. So is my client being forced, deceived, or coerced into providing commercial sex acts or labor? Are they sharing indicia that they're at risk? Those are some questions to start asking. And I'm going to break it down a little further here. I want to hone in on the means. So the law, the law breaks the means into those three categories: force, fraud, and coercion. But you can really think of those as three buckets for many, many methods that traffickers use to obtain and maintain power and control over their victims. The anti-trafficking movement is built on the foundation of other anti-violence movements. We have a lot to owe to the anti-sexual assault movement, domestic violence. And I'm sure that many of you are familiar with the power and control wheel that comes out of the domestic violence movement, which the graphic on your screen here is that power and control wheel tweaked for purposes of the anti-human trafficking movement. And this is in your resources, a version in Spanish as well. So this graphic illustrates some of the ways that power and control are used to exploit victims, survivors of human trafficking. The top 5 forms of force, fraud, or coercion coming out of the National Human Trafficking Hotline data set that we see here in the US are here on your screen. You can see the sex trafficking and labor trafficking are broken out, although they're actually very intertwined forms of exploitation. And you can see the top 5 that have been reported to the hotline. Inducing or exploiting substance abuse issues. There was a big case in Cumberland County about a year or 2 ago involving a situation where the trafficker used heroin, got the victims addicted to heroin in order to obtain and maintain power and control over them. So that's an example we've seen here in North Carolina. Of course, physical abuse, sexual abuse, intimidation, emotional abuse. And then on the labor trafficking side, much of the coercion comes in terms of finances or financial coercion. Threats to report to immigration, we see that quite a bit. Verbal abuse, withholding, denying needs.
Libby, I wonder if I could just ask a quick question about the power and control wheel.
Sure.
If you can go back to it real quick. Because I've used the domestic violence one with my clients to provide psychoeducation and kind of like see a light go off, you know, when they see themselves represented in this.
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering if you all, because I haven't used this one with clients, but I'm wondering how you all have used it with clients, or maybe anyone on the call can also share in the chat their experiences. How can this be used, I guess is my question.
That's a great question. And I'm going to pitch it to Charissa. I haven't used this directly in work with clients, but more in terms of helping me as an attorney understand what questions to ask and what to look for as I'm engaging with clients.
Yeah, and I would also say, given the context of the work that we're doing at JusticeMatters, we don't typically pull this out to work with clients. I think that this really is a tool that on the legal side is very helpful to equip attorneys, but would, in my opinion, be very appropriate to use in the same context. So I am curious if anybody else in the call, and that's one of the reasons we wanted to provide it to you in Spanish, so that if you're serving Spanish speaking survivors, that you have that tool to be able to pull out and to be able to talk with them in that context. So definitely let me know in the chat if anybody has used it.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. You can carry on, Libby, but if folks put stuff in the chat, I'll bring it up to your attention.
Great, thanks. Okay, we talked about the top 5 forms, and then I wanted to drill in a little deeper because I think this is really important. This is where we as providers recognize when a survivor of human trafficking is sitting in front of us. We've listed here some examples from our work at JusticeMatters of the methods that traffickers have used to give you a sense of what to look for. This list is certainly not exhaustive. And so we wanted to take a moment to do what I have learned is called a chatterfall, where we ask you, or I invite you to take a moment and think through in your work, which of these examples you've seen in your practice, and put those in the chat for us to see. And certainly if there are other examples you can think of that aren't on this list, please go ahead and put those in the chat too.
So a chatterfall is just getting a bunch of chats going. So there we go. Courtney got us started. So she says threat of report to ICE, harming children, fraud promises, fraudulent marriage proposals, forced substance use, rape, forced criminal activity, blackmail. Withholding needs. Harm to family in the home country. Threatening documentation or deportation, probably. Leslie says, I'm not sure if this falls in, but I'm told if several students told if they don't have a job, they'll report them to ICE and get sent back home. Confiscating documents.
Yep.
So quite a range.
Were there any new ones? I was listening to.
Yeah, I've been reading them as they come along, but that's pretty much what's coming in. A lot of harm to family members, financial abuse, credit sabotage.
Thanks for sharing that. We are, the anti-trafficking movement is still relatively young. And so has a lot to learn, and what you're seeing in your interactions with your clients can be so helpful to all of us here on the call, but also to the movement in general. All right, I'm gonna go big picture again and give you another helpful framework for understanding human trafficking. So Polaris, the national hotline, took all their data. They analyzed over 32,000 cases of human trafficking that were documented between the end of December 2007 and 2016. So it's the largest data set on human trafficking that's been compiled and then publicly analyzed in this way. And they went through the data and they identified 25 classifications or types of human trafficking in the United States, each with its own business model, trafficker profiles, recruitment strategies, victim profiles, and methods of control. Oh, the link down here, this is a really helpful document, and we have the link here, and then you can see this picture lists out the 25 typologies that they've broken this down into. We don't have time to go into all of them today, but wanted to draw your attention to that resource. So looking at this data, I wanted to pull out the top 5 recruitment tactics in particular that they've identified in these various typologies of human trafficking. And I think these are really insightful and helpful to us as we interact with our clients. So on the sex trafficking side, they identified intimate partner, marriage proposition, that's come up today, familial trafficking, a job offer, an advertisement posing as a benefactor, false promises, labor trafficking. Again, a job offer or advertisement, false promises, fraud, smuggling related, familial, posing as a benefactor. And I want to draw your attention in particular to the familial recruitment tactic here. So I think, if you follow sort of media in general, the common stereotype around human trafficking is that trafficking happens, it's perpetrated by a stranger or by a pimp. And in fact, in reality, it is much more complicated than that. So at Justice Matters, and then nationally, we're seeing 4 or 5 really general types of human trafficking. And the the North Carolina Coalition Against Sexual Assault has broken these out in a really helpful resource that I commend to you, their Human Trafficking Rape Crisis Center manual, where they go into this in more detail, but laying out that exploitation can happen without a third party. So the exchange of sex by a minor for anything of value is exploitation. It can include exchanging sex for drugs, shelter, food, money, or really any kind of goods or protection. There's pimp control human trafficking. The trafficker might recruit or manipulate the survivor through romantic attention, false promises of love, and so forth. There's peer exploitation. This can involve revenge porn or a peer exploiting another peer at the direction of an older trafficker. And also the familial type. And this we've seen at Justice Matters in situations where, for example, a mother might have an addiction to an illegal substance and is so desperate for that she ends up trafficking her child in order to bring in money so she can obtain the drug that she's using. It can also involve live streaming. A parent can live stream their child's acts, take pictures, many ways that familial human trafficking can take place. In terms of these typologies, the top venues or industries where we see human trafficking in North Carolina, again, this is broken out into labor trafficking and sex trafficking, although they can be intertwined and interrelated. In North Carolina, agriculture is the top venue for labor trafficking, and then restaurants, construction, begging rings, traveling sales crews. the sex trafficking side, we see sex trafficking in the illicit massage industry, which are businesses, you've probably seen these in the news too, businesses that pose as a legitimate massage business, but then they are actually selling sex acts inside. Hotel or motel-based, pornography, residence-based, and escort services. And as you can see at the bottom of the graphic, human trafficking really knows no bounds in that it can impact anyone regardless of gender, age, or citizenship. But this is the breakdown we saw in North Carolina in 2019 based on calls to the hotline, the national hotline.
Libby, we have a quick question from Nicole Ford. She asks, how is the mother looked at by the law if she is trafficking her children?
Yes, that gets really complicated. That's where we are really grateful at JusticeMatters to have both an immigration legal section and a family law section. That can get really complicated. So a mother might be prosecuted, as a trafficker. I think if the prosecutor is willing to look a little deeper and work with the service providers who might be working with the mom, they might uncover, the root or the real reasons why the mom is trafficking the child, and might, sort of flip and see that mom as a victim herself. I'll talk about this a little later, but we've seen, many situations where I guess taking a step back, this is not a black and white issue. So, oftentimes a trafficking victim will have a more extensive criminal record than the trafficker. A criminal record makes you vulnerable, and traffickers will prey on that. And then traffickers will also coerce or force individuals into illegal activity in order to maintain power and control over them. So, it really depends upon, every situation is so different, but that mother might be prosecuted, lose custody. It really depends upon the facts of the case. Does that help? Does that answer that question? It's complicated. Okay. Our family law attorney, Christy Malat, who leads our section, she's great. And, she's very busy, but if you have fact patterns or cases that come up, please don't hesitate to reach out, and we'll do the best we can to answer your question about a specific fact pattern you might be encountering right now with clients. All right, let's see. This is the resource I mentioned earlier, but this is in Spanish. No, this is a different one. This is a very useful resource as well. The Latino Face of Human Trafficking and Exploitation in the United States. There's a link at the bottom of this slide here and in your materials. So this is a Polaris report that looked at human trafficking in the Latinx population specifically. And based on the data that they have, they found that labor trafficking is more common than sex trafficking. They saw trafficking predominantly in the agricultural industry, in domestic work, and in construction, and that over 50% of likely victim survivors were from Mexico. But as you well know, this data is only so helpful because I think it takes a lot for many people to actually pick up the phone and call a hotline. And there are many reasons why someone might not call the hotline. As I close out my section here, before I turn it over to Charissa, I wanted to just take a minute to talk in a little more detail about these agriculture, domestic work, some of the predominant forms of trafficking identified in the Latinx population nationally. North Carolina has, last I knew, the 5th or 6th largest population of farm workers in the US, and the largest number of farm workers who come here on temporary visas to do farm work. In North Carolina, we are so lucky to have the Legal Aid Farm Worker Unit, which works to protect the rights and enforce the rights of migrant workers. And they released details, I think this was last year, 2019, 2 years ago now, of a $75,000 settlement that they reached with 3 labor contractors who recruited workers from Mexico through what's called the H-2A visa program. And in showing this to you and bringing this to your attention, I think this interview Frank Stasio did with Caitlin Ryland of the Farm Worker Unit is really insightful and worth your time listening to learn more about trafficking in agriculture. But also just want to highlight that just because an individual has a visa, an immigration visa, does not make them is not necessarily a protective factor against trafficking. So for example, this H-2A visa is the way it is set up, the way the system works, it actually puts the laborer at heightened risk, I would say. Domestic work. I won't read this because I've just got a note that I'm taking too much time, but this is a scenario that we see as well, where individuals are exploited, recruited to come here for legitimate domestic work and trafficked. And then this survivor story, I commend to you. It is worth reading in its entirety. I think Jose has shared his story and is wants to communicate, from what he's sharing, wants to communicate to us at the national level how we can better understand and support LGBTQ youth in particular who are at heightened risk of trafficking. And then finally, just want to emphasize that human trafficking can happen to anyone. That's true, and that's what we typically hear. But most importantly, some people are more vulnerable than others, and human trafficking at its core, most fundamentally, is the exploitation of vulnerability for profit. And I commend you NC CASA's HT prevention or human trafficking prevention toolkit, which so beautifully speaks to this. They say, by centering our work around marginalized communities, everyone is served. We cannot end trafficking without ending the intersecting oppressions that create vulnerability to human trafficking in the first place. I would say that we are not centering the margins as a movement, certainly have not over the past 4 years at the national level. And so it's my hope as this new day dawns that we can together bring this to reality. We definitely witness the impact of systemic racism in our work at Justice Matters, and are working to combat that for the sake of our clients and our neighbors and our communities.
Thanks, Libby. So if y'all want to take a deep breath, now that Libby so beautifully gave you that overview, I hope that now we can take all that she just equipped you with and to talk about what does this look like practically in your day-to-day. And one thing I want to denote right here is I want to normalize to you essentially the feeling of panic or of what in the world do I do that you may feel if you start to recognize some of these signs as you're serving survivors of victim survivors of human trafficking in your work. Want to let you know I have felt that too, as someone who's worked in this field for quite a long time, has worked with many survivors of victim survivors of human trafficking. That is something that is very real, but we can talk through what does it look like to day in and day out, really be aware that this is going on within our communities, that we are likely, even if we do not recognize this. I really appreciate those on the chat that mentioned you weren't sure. I love that that means that you are thinking, you're analyzing, you're processing, and you're looking for that. So as we're looking and aware and seeking to serve, it is, at some moments, I would say, scary work, and it can be ones that are challenging, but there are some great resources. And I think as we're talking and processing this, I encourage you to think about some of the other ways that you have been equipped and trained already, and to be able to identify that you're actually in many ways already set up to be able to do this very well. Because there's lots of other ways that as you work for survivors of human trafficking, we can pull from wisdom from the domestic violence field, from the sexual assault field, and from working with children who have been abused, abandoned, and neglected. So let's get practical here. So if we can go to signs of human trafficking. So one of the things that I want to mention right here is what we're providing on this slide and the next slide are some red flags for human trafficking, broken down between the behavioral, the physical health, and the environmental side of things. What I always think is really important is to remind you that these are indicators, and you're on the behavioral health field, so you're used to this day in and day out. These can be indicators. They are not a clear diagnosis. And so many of these red flags that you see may be true if someone is a victim survivor of human trafficking, but they also may be true for other situations that may be going on. And as you will recall from Libby's presentation, human trafficking can occur while other things are also occurring, whether substance abuse or other situations, abuse and neglect, other types of exploitation. And so I want to encourage you to use this list to be able to think and consider and to be aware and to pay attention as you're working with individuals that you're serving. And so for the sake of time, I'm not going to read this, but would encourage you to access this resource. And this link that's listed on these two slides, I think is available in the handouts, but you're also welcome to link it here. It's a national training on human trafficking called SOAR. Yes, Libby, if you can go that next one, that'd be great. Thank you. And so I think we pretty much covered that on those two slides. So if we can go on to populations at heightened risk. So I want to pause here for a moment. And as Libby was mentioning at the very end, that even though human trafficking can happen with anybody, we do know that that vulnerability that really is that core of what happens with human trafficking. There's certain populations that have an increased vulnerability. So what you see right here is a list of individuals. And I really want to highlight a couple of these, especially given the fact that we're talking about human trafficking within the Latinx population today. So denoting that those migrant and seasonal workers, refugees, and asylees are at definite heightened risk. There's multiple vulnerabilities that those individuals may be experiencing. Disconnected and homeless youth. And this one also really does connect, if you go down just a little bit, to the LGBTQ population. Oftentimes, one of the things that we can see, as I'm sure many of you are aware, is those that youth that identify as LGBTQ might, because of cultural or family situations, not have a safe home due to their current way that they are identifying with their orientation. And so they may be disconnected or they may be homeless. Those don't necessarily always have to occur together, but that is something that we definitely see. And that, I think is another important point, is that many of these individuals listed in these populations, they may hit a number of these things. And so they may also be of a lower social and economic status. Then that transition between the child welfare and juvenile justice and prison system, anytime we're in that transition stage, there's a lot of vulnerability that can be exploited. And then also the substance abuse that Libby's mentioned in several of the cases that she highlighted. So really want to encourage you, as you're working within populations that might hit in these groups and have some of those heightened vulnerabilities, to be aware of, to be asking questions, to be paying attention. We can go to the next.
Charissa,
Yes.
I just wanted to pause real quick while we're talking on risk, because there's a specific question from Nicole Ford, who asks, is there a correlation between big sporting events and human trafficking? So noticing in the map that the red areas are kind of near those places as well.
Mm-hmm.
I'd also heard that it's also tied to like highway networks and things like that. So what are some of those environmental correlations that we see? What do you guys know about?
Yeah, I really appreciate that question. I'm actually going to ping that to Libby, because I think she's covered this several times in some presentations, and I think does it beautifully.
Yeah, it's I think human trafficking can increase during major sporting events, but I think that really isn't the big issue, and sort of distracts us from what is happening day to day in our communities, why people are vulnerable, and why they're being trafficked sort of day to day. So I think there have been some studies on that. It's my understanding, and I can look for this and try to drop it in the chat, but that is somewhat overblown, and is distracting us as a movement from the real root causes, or the root causes of human trafficking.
Yeah, and I think
that is a good point, though. I think we believe in North Carolina that one of the reasons for that we are typically in the top or understood to be in the top 10 in terms of rates of human trafficking nationally as a state is because of our location on the intersection of the major north-south highway and east-west I-40. But I do also want to note that transportation is not a required element of human trafficking. So we've served clients who were born, raised, and potentially have never left Durham County, and are still a recognized victim of human trafficking. So transportation across a state line or a national border is not required. But the highways certainly do facilitate a trafficker's ability to move victims from city to city. So that's great that you raised that.
Thank you.
Thanks, Libby. Thanks, Juan. So I'm going to try to go a little bit faster because I definitely want to allow for us to get to the case study. So just wanted to note on this slide that you can see some of the heightened vulnerabilities and risks that we can see from that Polaris data. And there is a resource that I'll try to put in the chat if we don't have it at the end, but thinking about a screening tool. So there's several screening tools that are available through different organizations to help in this identification process. So I'll try to share that in just a moment when I'm done with this section of the presentation. And if we could talk for just a moment here about human trafficking in the Latinx population. So again, for the sake of time, and I'm not going to dive too deeply into this, but if there's questions you have for this slide at the end, please, we can definitely come back to this. So a couple of key points that I want to encourage us to think about is that when we talk about the Latinx population, of course, what we know is that there's multiple communities and multiple cultures. So it is not going to be the same across the entire the Latinx population. There's uniqueness between each community and culture that is represented, especially when we're thinking about in the United States. So I really want to encourage, as you're serving Latinx survivors, victim survivors of human trafficking, or just serving individuals in general, that you keep that in mind, that between one client to the next, human trafficking can always look different, but especially when we're switching cultures. The other thing is that we do know that the trauma normalization that tends to happen within this group can really shift and change, and it can really create some difficulties in individuals recognizing that trafficking is occurring because there are so many experiences of trauma. Thirdly, the community constructs an understanding of trauma. As a non-Spanish speaker, I'm not going to pronounce these terms, but some gracious members of our team have translated for them. So the first term that you see, it kind of shows the misconception, this idea that human trafficking only occurs and is something that is true of the white culture. And that can go back to a long history as we think about how human trafficking laws have been understood, versus the more accurate term that you'll see in the second. So I think it's a great opportunity for you as you're interacting with individuals to do some education, to speak into some of those community constructs and to help correct. And then lastly, there tends to be some confusion between smuggling and human trafficking. And so if we can go to the next slide, one of the things that I just want to mention again is that within the pandemic right now, many of those pathways, and you'll see the little graphic on the left to represent essentially the helpers, as we tend to talk about this with our children. So those that help and those that can connect oftentimes are those like yourself that can help identify and help individuals of human trafficking, victim survivors of human trafficking, be able to be identified and to be able to connect to resources. But right now that pandemic creates a lot of complications for that. But I think one of the reasons we're very excited, as I mentioned, to speak with you all today is thanks to the wonder of video and phone, many of you all are still seeing clients, still interacting on a regular basis. So I really want to encourage you that now more than ever, it's really key that you as a profession are aware of the signs of human trafficking, are aware of what to do, how to respond, which leads me into the next slide. So let's talk about that for a moment. So when we're thinking about responding to human trafficking, I think this is a really helpful graphic to look at and to kind of orient where we're at for what the needs for a victim survivor of human trafficking would be. And so what you'll see is that we think about those immediate needs that can be, typically between 24 to 72 hour period, those very quick things that are needed. And then we have the ongoing needs, and this can extend from 2 days to multiple months up to a year, and then long-term can go beyond. And so what you'll see right in the middle of this ongoing needs is what we're talking about here today, is the legal advocacy and that behavioral health care. And so as you're working with individuals who may be victim survivors of human trafficking, just keep in mind that you are a key component of their restoration process, and you're one of many. So a great opportunity for collaboration. I'm gonna go to the next slide. The other thing I really want to remind you of is you may be encountering somebody before, like when they're still in an active trafficking situation. And so you may be, as we're talking about right now, especially in the pandemic, you may be the person that can help get them connected to those first immediate needs. So I wanted to take a moment to talk about really practically what you can do as an individual practitioner, or if you're working within an organization with that. So one of the first things we really want to suggest to you is to develop an organizational policy, or again, if you're a solo practitioner, develop your own policy for what you will do if you believe or suspect that somebody may be a victim survivor of human trafficking. Some of the resources that we've been putting in the chat can be really helpful with this. So the SOAR training, that is a national training, and they have them specific for both behavioral health, public health, as well as medical service providers. So I would encourage you to go to that website, making sure that you take that training as well. NCCASA and NCDV, I always get the acronym wrong, but essentially the North Carolina Coalition Against Sexual Assault and the North Carolina Domestic Violence Coalition. Both of those have amazing resources to equip agencies to really be able to create that plan and response. So I encourage you to access those. And for those that are in the medical setting, there's an organization called Heal Trafficking. That's a national group that has a really helpful listserv. And then also Freedom Network is another national organization that has a lot of resources, a lot of great trainings, and can really help think through what do these policies need to look like. I do always like to emphasize, you need to be thinking through with your policies, what if the individual's trafficker is also in the building? So at JusticeMatters, one of the things that we have set in place is we have a standard process when we're in person to ensure and to let people know when they're coming in that just every single person that meets with the attorney is going to need to briefly, even if they have somebody there in a supportive role, will need to meet one-on-one with the attorney first, just to make sure that they understand about the rules of confidentiality and privilege. And that's good legal practice, but that also allows us for that standard practice moment to where if there is some type of situation where somebody may be being trafficked and that individual who is either the direct trafficker or is connected to the trafficking situation is separated from that person. And we have a plan in place for if that is identified, what to do. And that goes down to even just our exit strategy, where we have panic buttons. The other thing is in this video context, you can't really do that as easily. So I really want to encourage you to think about, as you're scheduling appointments on the phone, what are some of the opportunities you have to ask questions to set that up? And then when you're actually, whether you're doing it via video or via phone, thinking about when the individual's in the room, what are ways that you can creatively understand if it's a safe space for that person or if there may be somebody else present. Ensuring that all your staff are trained, because every person along the process has that opportunity to hear the information. Encourage you to select a screening tool to help it. So if you do suspect that somebody is a victim survivor of human trafficking, that you as an organization have a screening tool that you have selected and that everybody's trained to know how to use. Know your local resources. One of the situations that, sorry, I'm getting chats about time. So one of the resources that we've included is a North Carolina directory for those that are serving victim survivors of human trafficking. So I encourage you to pull that up, find the resources that are local to your area, especially thinking about this in immediate needs. And so making sure that you have those numbers readily available. Know your reporting requirements in the state that you're in. And so in North Carolina, specifically, I do want to mention if it's a minor victim of human trafficking, you do want to make that report to law enforcement and as well as to DSS. And there's definitely some great trainings that go into that process as well, because sometimes these individuals are in dangerous situations, similar to what you might think about with domestic violence. And so you want to be very careful in that process. So really thinking about it from the DV situation about, phone numbers that are showing up, what information is being shared, what are people leaving your office with, what resources, And are those things safe? And then encourage you to debrief and evaluate as a team. And lastly, one of the other resources we have is a little card that is in English and Spanish that has the National Human Trafficking Hotline to make reports. So I encourage you to make sure everyone on your team has access to that. If you use your cell phone a lot, I encourage you to go ahead and put that into your cell phone as well. And so we're going to cover this next section very quickly. One of the things that we really hope, and I point you back to Jose's story to talk about, some of the key ways that across our entire service sector, there's so many opportunities for this prevention work. But when we think about prevention, especially primary prevention, is we're thinking about preventing harm before it occurs. And some of you may be familiar with the river analogy of if you're standing by a river and you see people coming down and you're spending all this time helping the person get out of the river, and then the next person, and then the next person, and you don't have time to go up to the top of the river and to understand, are people falling in? Is there not a guardrail? Are they slipping? Is there a sign that needs to be changed? What are the things that are happening at the top of the river that are leading to ending up with people at the bottom? And how can we go to the top of the river and figure out what's going on? So that's really what we think about with prevention. And so with prevention, if we can go to the next slide, the other thing that we're really recognizing is those social determinants of health become very key in thinking about whether people are living in conditions that are really allowing them to thrive and helping to work to prevent situations of harm. And so for the sake of time, I'm going to skip over that, but there's that resource there if you want to read more about social determinants of health. And I wanted to note that for many victim survivors of human trafficking, there may be a lot of barriers that are in place to be able to really thrive on all the areas of well-being. And so some of those things that we think about are language, culture, immigration, legal status, or other types of legal situations, financial, education, and a current trafficking situation. And one of the things that we really want to honor within you all as behavioral health professionals is that you are working day in and day out to help promote resiliency, which we have defined on this slide. And we really commend that and are very grateful. And you're also working on that prevention side. So you are really sitting right in the middle of so much and are so uniquely positioned. And we like to highlight on this slide just the beauty that happens with resiliency. That little graphic down there was created by a survivor of human trafficking that our team worked with. And she did art therapy, working with a behavioral health professional as she was walking through her healing process. And when she started, most of her colors were dark black, very dark blues. And as she continued to walk through that therapeutic process, we started to see these signs of hope with this tree. And there's a beautiful series that has been created that really shows that and shows the tree transitioning from that darkness to the light as that healing was occurring. So we commend that. And we also want to denote that we have experienced, and I personally, there's a reason as a behavioral health professional, I work with attorneys, is that resiliency that we see being promoted within the behavioral health field. Legal services really, we also believe, have the ability to help on the prevention side and to help promote resiliency. And the key part is whenever we're collaborating and working together. So I want to turn it over to Libby to quickly talk through some of those options.
Yeah. So I'm going to go through this very quickly. I think you probably all are aware at a high level of various legal options that are potentially available to your clients. And as Charissa said, really do believe that we as attorneys can work together with you to promote resiliency. Have listed out some of the legal, public, and social benefits that we see in terms of immigration relief specifically, which is one of our focuses here at Justice Matters. Immigration law. This is in your handout, so I'm just going to draw your attention to it. But what we've really tried to do to help you is list out sort of what to look for. Didn't want to get technical with all the details of the law and who's eligible and who's not, but just a general sense of what to look for as you interact with your clients. Not so you can be a lawyer and provide legal advice, but so you know when to refer someone to a lawyer for assistance. We've also included in your packet a list of all the nonprofit legal service providers in North Carolina and hope that that's helpful to you. On the family law side, there are fewer nonprofit or pro bono family law options, but that is something that we're able to provide, a service we provide here in the Triangle, and focusing on really child custody in particular. But these are some other opportunities that might be available to your clients. And then civil law, just want to encourage you to keep in mind that a survivor of human trafficking can recover financially through civil litigation. I think it's rare that an attorney would advise a client to pursue, to take a case to court, but there are options, and there's the possibility of settlement as well to help make that client whole in terms of their financial loss, cover medical bills and so forth that's related to their trafficking. And then a survivor might have landlord-tenant needs, have accumulated debt during the trafficking, need help accessing benefits or education. And then in terms of criminal law, just briefly want to make sure that you're aware that a victim survivor of human trafficking or any crime is not entitled to their own attorney throughout the court process. So while they might be confused and think that a prosecutor is representing them, that prosecutor is actually not there to protect the victim's rights. They're there to prosecute the case, and they answer to the public. Their end goal is public safety, really. And so encourage you to connect your client, if they are a victim or a witness, with an attorney who can walk with them through that process. Criminal defense, and then post-conviction relief are other forms of criminal law services that a survivor of human trafficking might need or be eligible for. And again, I would say, just because the law has determined that your client is a criminal or has in an immigration proceeding, your client has a final order of removal, I would encourage you as an advocate that that's not the end of the line. There are waivers and options available for an individual who has a final order of removal entered against them. And we have successfully represented our clients who have criminal records and so forth, and worked with other attorneys so that they were able to get a T visa and they were able to stay in the United States. I know that was super quick. So feel free to chat in any questions and I'll do my best to answer them.
I wonder actually if we can make a pause, because we're having lots of questions coming in. I know folks are wanting to get a hold of these resources. But yeah, I just wanted to take a pause, if that's okay, and invite
Sure.
folks on the call to unmute and ask questions. I know, Nicole, we had deferred a really great question earlier from you. I'm having a hard time locating, so if you can unmute and ask your question.
Sure. I had one experience with doing an assessment for a female who I believe was a victim of human trafficking, and I unfortunately didn't have a chance to work with her in therapy. But her concern was that she wasn't in a safe place when she left the office, and she was afraid to talk because she and it was really hard. And probably because I was new with working with the victim, so I didn't know. And I don't know if there were as many resources as there are now. This was probably a few years ago.
Mm-hmm.
But what do we do, or how can we keep them safe when they leave us, if they're wanting to get help?
Charissa, did you want to?
Yeah, so I think a couple of things is one, I'd want to point you back to that recommendation of, even today, pull up that resource that we have shared with what are the resources within your community or as close as you can get. Sometimes we do have to step in North Carolina, depending on what area you're in, you have to go a little further out. But look to identify, those case management organizations that can help with this. Look to identify what are the local shelters, and encourage you to take those steps to connect with individuals, checking to make sure that they have Spanish speakers or they have a language line as well, so you can know if it's appropriate referrals. So have that resource ready to go. The other thing I really want to encourage is, and I think we are all very familiar with this, is at the end of the day, we do need to, again, unless if it's a minor, we're required to report. If it's somebody who is an adult, we need to allow people to make those choices. And so at the end of the day, I would not say it's our role to keep an adult safe. It is our role to recognize, to identify, to offer resources. That power and control wheel could also be a helpful option within if somebody is not identifying as a victim survivor of human trafficking. But to encourage you to be aware of what is your responsibility. Again, thinking about the legal side too, for what are you required by law, but then what is still that individual's choice, and how can you as a provider support that? Libby, I don't know if you'd add anything with that.
Yeah, I mean, if you really are at a loss, you don't have a policy, you're not sure who the partner agencies are in your area, you can call that human trafficking hotline with your client, and they will have the choice whether or not they want a report to be made to law enforcement or not. So you can, on the phone with your client, work with them to find the next, a safe option if they do want to get out. Certainly, if they want to call law enforcement, it's an emergency situation, there's always 911. And I would encourage you to connect with immigration attorneys in your area, in particular in advance, so that even if you do need to alert law enforcement, your client also has the option of meeting or connecting with an immigration attorney who can advocate for their rights. I know that undocumented immigrants are treated differently based on county, state, and so forth. And so I do encourage you to connect with an attorney, have a good ally that you can reach out to. Does that help,
Thank
Nicole? Okay.
Thank y'all. Folks I think are super interested in obviously everything y'all are talking about, and they're feeling the need for further training on this stuff. I know you've mentioned the SOAR training for staff, but are there some other trainings or organizations that you all would recommend folks seek out after today's webinar?
Yes, one in particular, January 28th, so I think that's coming up quickly. Dr. Nancy Hagan with the North Carolina Human Trafficking Commission is doing a training online through, I think it's Charlotte AHEC. Would encourage you to take that training and then connect with her in particular around further training needs. She has a background working with migrant laborers through, I believe, the Catholic Church, and is very well versed in particular in terms of labor trafficking. Charissa, anything you would add to that?
Yeah, I think that is one of the best North Carolina local resources. I see someone suggesting NC-CASA, so definitely would encourage you there, as we've mentioned.
Yes.
Yes, and then a couple of the national ones that are listed on your handouts, including the HEAL trafficking if you are in any type of medical setting or public health setting, and then Freedom Network is a national organization with some great training opportunities in both of those.
NCCAT as well, the North Carolina Coalition Against Human Trafficking. For those of you who are out of state, you can connect. I would reach out to the hotline, has a list of providers and could probably put you in touch with regional response efforts or statewide response efforts in your state and region.
Thank you all. I haven't seen any other questions come up, but I wonder if we can just kind of keep going, and then if they come up, we can pause again.
Sure.
Sure. And again, so that we can get to that case study that we promised, I think what we're seeing right now is what we want to talk about here is that collaboration. So I'm just going to briefly mention a couple of things, but I think it sounds like we're in a group that is ready to collaborate, which is wonderful. So one of the things just want to mention is we do have common goals within all these professions, which we daily get to work out at JusticeMatters. So we can attest that there are a lot of things that behavioral health and legal service providers really are committed to and have consistent across their professions. So I encourage you to think about that as you're getting ready to collaborate and connect, and think about which legal professionals within your area you might be wanting to look to really connect with as you're coming off of this training. You can go to the next slide. And so with that, we know that there's lots of unique aspects within each profession. I can mention HIPAA, and I can mention the rules of professional conduct, and I think I probably don't need to say much more beyond that. So we definitely at times have those rules that we're both under that might create some complexities. One thing we always want to mention is these rules that we're under are rules that we're under with our profession, which means we would still assume that everybody is being professional. And so these should never be used, in our opinion, as a crutch for poor service or lack of professionalism. So I really want to encourage you, and I asked the other members of our legal team going into this presentation if there was anything they would add, and they really did state that they would encourage you to reach out if you have some questions or concerns about something you've heard from a legal provider. Go ahead and reach out to them and ask and have a conversation and see if maybe there might be a miscommunication going on there, and just to understand more. You can go to the next slide. So just briefly mentioning, these are some of the big roadblocks that we've encountered or recognized as we've trained and talked about this over the years. So the release of information, the risk of subpoena, that communication breakdown that our legal team is mentioning, where sometimes we can feel like we have different or conflicting professional goals. And then also sometimes within that communication breakdown, there might be a fear or perceived unwillingness to collaborate. And so we want to acknowledge those and acknowledge that we at JusticeMatters and we know of other legal professionals are very committed to working through these. And I know we have been so grateful, especially for our partnership with El Futuro, who's local to Durham, and have really appreciated over the years getting to have conversations and working and identifying how to do this well. So at least on the JusticeMatters side, we can testify, we really think this is possible. And we've seen so much benefit from to our clients. Go to the next slide.
Don't give up on us as a profession. I think that's what Chris is trying to communicate. There are definitely bad lawyers out there. We are not trying to absolve the legal profession. I will say that.
Yeah. Thanks. And so a couple of tips and recommendations. So again, understanding roles, thinking ahead. So thinking through, one of the things that we do at our office is we think through and have, anytime we're working with case managers or new behavioral health service providers, I try to reach out and have a phone call and just kind of talk through with them before we have an actual client situation. I try to talk through, like, here's how our office works. Here's some of the constraints that we have due to our profession. Ask them, what are some things that you're dealing with at your office? And we found that those conversations can be really helpful before we have an actual client situation. And so that way everyone's kind of on the same page, has talked through, has already been able to identify before we have some of the complexities with a release of information, how we're going to proceed, how we're going to collaborate. Always communicate, always revising, both within your organization and with your community partners. Utilize the resources that are available. Looking at some of the trainings, it could be great to look at, what are some of the lawyer trainings that are available to talk about trauma and understanding, like, what is some of the information that the legal profession is getting about what you are really an expert in. And so what are some of the ways that you might be able to think about in your communication, how to really utilize that. Look for legal partners who have a knowledge of trauma or who are committed to learn more about that trauma-informed principles. And if they say, oh, what's a resource? Have a resource ready to go to share with them. Thinking about the legal proceedings, people within our team have been really happy to talk with our clients' behavioral health providers to talk about, like, what does this upcoming trial mean? What's going on? What does it mean when we say that there's been a subpoena issued? What does it mean that we have to serve by publication? What does a order of removal really look like? What's the steps within immigration court? So I encourage you to reach out and ask the attorneys if they can explain, and if they can't explain the details of the case itself due to a release of information, they should at least be able to talk with you about, what does this generally mean in terms of the legal profession. Be strategic with timing of appointments. Our legal team has really appreciated, and there's people on these calls who have done this personally, who have been aware that there's a difficult court date coming up and have worked to make sure to either schedule a therapy session before or after, or sometimes both. So we've been so grateful to know that that's been a resource that we can encourage with our clients and be able to work with our community partners. Also, in very special circumstances, one of our legal team members mentioned this, sometimes a joint meeting can be very helpful especially to the legal team. And you have to be, of course, very careful with this in terms of confidentiality and privilege. But sometimes our team has reached out and asked for at least a portion of the meeting to see if a behavioral health professional can join, or the behavioral health professional has asked if they could join for just a portion to kind of understand a little more about what's going on. So again, those are pretty special circumstances, but it is a tool that sometimes, especially our family law team, will utilize. And then you as a behavioral health professional, especially if you're the one making the referral, can share recommendations to us for supporting clients. We've been so grateful when sometimes we've gotten referrals from Alpha Turo team. They've let us know like certain things about triggers that the client might be facing, or if it's safe to leave a message on the phone. And those things are so, so helpful. And so really, last thing is just want to encourage you again and again, as we've been saying, you're always in a unique position and a key position to both support prevention, identify, respond, and collaborate, but now more than ever in the pandemic. So I really want to encourage you to take that breath and to know that we are so grateful as legal providers in North Carolina to be able to collaborate with you, and so thankful that on those 7 to 8 sessions that you're doing in 50 minutes day after day on those Zoom calls, that you're still thinking and seeking to learn and seeking to identify. So thank you for that. We know it takes so much, and just want you to know that your clients benefit from it, and we are so, so grateful. Pass it to Libby.
Charissa and Libby, I'm wondering, because we have about 10 minutes left, I was wondering if there's a way to quickly wrap up, but I wanted to open it more importantly for questions, because I know folks have a lot to ask about the wonderful stuff you've shared today.
Sure, and I'll say I'm happy to stick on the call. I don't know if that's an option on your end, but I'm happy to stay on the call longer if that would be helpful.
Yeah, we can stay a little bit. We have our echo call at 12, but we can probably stay for about 10 minutes or so after.
Okay, all right, great. Well, these last couple slides were just a synopsis of what we encourage you to do, connect with and participate in your local and in our statewide response efforts, get further training. Here's information for that AHEC training I mentioned on the 28th, and SOAR and the hotline.
And Libby, I'm wondering if we could just go to the case study slide. And so maybe that might prompt questions, or we could jump straight into questions, whichever the group prefers.
Yeah, I think we can just jump in, and maybe, if the case kind of springs up as like a talking way to explain things, I think that would work. But yeah, I think we'll open it up. I know quite a few questions have come in about like procedures, how to support people, whether, therapists can attend, be in attendance in cases. So I welcome any and all to unmute and ask your questions.
Hi, I have a question for the Justice Matters team. I'm now, after a presentation, I actually realized that I've worked with several clients who have experienced some form of exploitation or are at high risk of human trafficking, which I wasn't as aware of before. And I'm actually working with a client now who recently reached out because she was receiving threats from ex-husband to be deported if she didn't follow through with something. And I wasn't sure how to help her in that instance, but I sort of knew a little bit about your agency and want to know, do you guys provide quick, brief, free consultation calls with people who just need quick information, just in case something like that were to happen? Or is there a direction that you can point me at for that specific case?
Yeah, so I can let you know that in general within our process, when somebody calls in, and so we have an intake process. So if somebody calls in, identifies that they are a survivor, they think they may be in some type of situation that is not safe, we would of course encourage them, if they feel unsafe, make sure they have those hotline resources. And also know to call the police. But then typically we do bring those situations to the legal team. And so we have an option where we could escalate that more quickly if that's needed. And then our legal team, if they think they may be able to speak into it, we offer all of our services at no cost. And right now during the pandemic, we are doing it either via phone or video. We are a small organization, so we always make sure people know we're not an emergency responder. So we can try to speed up the process, but sometimes there might be a lag time of about a week. But if there is something where somebody's needing something very quickly, they are of course welcome to call us, but I also think it's a great point to ping back to what Libby mentioned about the human trafficking resource line. But if it's specifically about legal, would still encourage you to either reach out to us or another legal service provider, and just letting know that there is a more urgent situation. So we have had situations where that's happened, and we've been able to get an attorney on the line with the survivor sometimes that day or sometimes the very next day to be able to speak into that.
Where are you located?
They're located in Wake County.
Oh, great. Okay.
Yes, it's a situation where she's just nervous that he may actually take some form of legal action. And I'm not too familiar with law, so I just want her to have background information, but it's definitely not, I wouldn't say it's an emergency situation, just more of like she needs some quick, accurate information.
But I would encourage you to please feel free to share our number, and I can go ahead and state it right now too. It's on your resource sheet, but our intake line is 919-794-7511. And we operate that on business hours, 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. And typically if somebody calls in, we try to return those calls within 1 to 2 business days. And if it's a situation like that, do encourage you to let clients know. And we will ask on the call if there's any type of urgency as well, so we can be aware. But typically if it's something like that, we should be able to, if the legal team thinks they can speak into it, be able to offer a phone call. Typically, I would say within a week if it's an urgent situation. If it's a more in-depth interview process, then it might be a little bit longer. And we are able to offer that in Spanish and English in-house, and then we would work to provide translation or interpretation services for other languages.
Okay, great. So whoever calls, if she calls the intake department, it can be in Spanish. She only speaks Spanish.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
Thank you
absolutely.
guys. That's so helpful.
Yes,
Just to
absolutely.
be clear, since y'all are from all over the U.S. even, we provide our immigration services statewide for survivors of human trafficking, family law services for the Triangle only, so Wake, Durham, and Orange County. But feel free to reach out or even encourage your client to reach out, even if you're not really sure they qualify, and we'll do the best we can to refer them on to another service provider if we're unable to serve.
And I just want to highlight one of your handouts is our general information sheet that we really have designed to, with you all in mind, to think about as you're in the midst of a 50-minute session, as these quick fact patterns are coming up. You'll see on the sheet some examples of somebody who may be eligible for legal services, and you'll see a denotation at the bottom about our number as well as essentially our service area. And again, all services that we offer, if someone qualifies for our services, are offered at no cost. Clients may be responsible for some of the fees associated with applications. Say if they're going to submit an immigration application, we're not able to cover that as an organization. But in terms of the legal services, we offer that at no cost. And then the handouts have some, as Libby mentioned, immigration attorneys throughout the state as well, that are either low cost or no cost as well.
Thank you all. Want to bring in a couple more questions. I think some folks were asking about procedures. I forget who it was, but are therapists allowed in these hearings where our clients may be, going through the legal proceedings for human trafficking?
Yeah, that was me. I have experience working with SVU, and I was a child advocate for sexual abuse in New York City, and which was amazing. And the SVU unit over there was awesome. So we were very involved in the whole court process, and I think it was super helpful for the client to have that extra support. So I was just wondering if it worked the same with the human trafficking situation, and how that all, like, if it was appropriate or not appropriate.
I think it really varies by law enforcement agency and even officer here in North Carolina in terms of, what involvement they want or will try to prevent in their cases. In terms of court proceedings, well, in general, your clients have a right to an attorney. So worst case, if you can't get in as an advocate, ensure that they have an attorney and that their attorney is able to go in and protect their rights in whatever hearing or investigation step or stage the case is in. Just generally speaking, does that?
It just depends. Like, even just to sit, like, not necessarily like to speak in the court hearing, but just kind of like to be with them, was, we were prosecutor kind of like behind the scenes. And then during the court hearing, like, you know, that we weren't asked any questions. It was just a matter of just being there and sitting with them, you know, even holding their hand, like just kind of being an extra person, you know, because obviously to see your you know, perpetrator, you know, is completely horrifying. So just to have the more people, the friendly faces, I feel like that's so helpful.
Yes, generally, I think an advocate would be and should be allowed in a court proceeding. Things might be different now because of the pandemic, because of COVID. If you're being told that you are not allowed, I would keep asking questions and figure out, is it a matter of law, or is it
Right.
is it something else? Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think we've got time for a few more questions. I know there's a few folks that we didn't get to earlier, but.
I have a question about international adoption, and if you all are noting that you're seeing more children through international adoption who are being trafficked. I only ask that question because my colleagues and I over the last couple of years are seeing children being passed from one adoptive home to another adoptive home, and there are actually Facebook groups to send children to other homes if they're not a good fit for the home that where they were adopted into. And I had another incident that happened just a few weeks ago with a teenager, and it makes me very concerned on multiple levels about the emotional health of these children. But I just wondered if there was data, or if you all had experienced international adoptees being trafficked.
We haven't served clients in that scenario, and I am not an expert on that, or we're not experts at Justice Matters on that, but I know that there are concerns about that, and that children being adopted internationally are vulnerable. There are concerns about human trafficking in the home country to get to the point where the child is made available for adoption, and then certainly once they are adopted out. So if you could, I don't have a resource off the top of my head, but I'm happy to check with our family law team to see if there's something we can share with you. If you would reach out, or I don't know what's the best way, put your email in the.
Yeah, you can share. Well, I don't want to put your email on blast, so if you can if you can direct message me your email, we'll get it over to Libby and Charissa on the chat. But if not, just email us also with all of the reminders for the webinar today, and we can figure it out.
Thanks for raising that. And, you know, one more point, as folks are dropping off, back to the need for legal services, I would say your client should not have to pay for an immigration attorney's help to obtain a T visa, which is the form of the immigration visa available for survivors of human trafficking. Just wanted to note that to y'all before you drop off. We are aware of attorneys charging really high rates for that. But between us and legal aid and other nonprofit legal service providers, your client should be able to obtain that service at no charge. And certainly are aware that, you know, many folks are trafficked because of financial instability or poverty that makes them vulnerable to trafficking, and don't want them, you know, as an attorney to be put back in a situation of debt, which can be exploited because of our services.
If I can just add on with that, I know that in the chat, several people were talking about how their credit had been kind of ruined through a trafficking situation, it sounds like. So just want to ping that there are some organizations that are working specifically for victims, survivors of human trafficking to be able to correct that. So also, if you are one of those that would like some of those resources, please feel free to send your email to Juan as well. I'd be happy to share and point you to a couple organizations that are doing that as well.
If you're in North Carolina, you can reach out to Sarah Byrne. She's an attorney with Moore Van Allen in Charlotte. Over financial or debt related issues.
So I think any other burning questions? If not, I'm gonna start maybe wrapping us up and kind of summarizing this wonderful presentation they all gave today.
I have a question. This is Rachel. I'm a therapist at El Futuro. I'm thinking as far as like how things have changed because of COVID and doing especially intakes over video. Do you guys have any suggestions about, as far as screening goes, how to, like, what language to use when we're not sure if they're really in a safe place to do some of this screening?
Are you talking in terms of, would it be when you are screening on intake or screening?
Yeah, screening on intake or maybe even during a session, but how to really screen in a discreet way if there's a risk, if we might be with a client who's going through a situation that would qualify as trafficking because we're not in a more controlled environment like we are in the clinic. We don't always know who's listening and if they feel comfortable disclosing, and kind of any suggestions, because you guys have been doing intakes over video and phone, how you've been addressing that.
Yeah, I think that's such a great question. So one of the things I would just encourage you is to think about every step of your process. And so to think about what is the message that's being communicated when somebody first calls in with El Futuro, all the way, or whichever organization is, all the way through intake. And so thinking about what are creative ways at the very beginning, what some of the things that we ask is, what's the best way to communicate with you? How will you be able to give us the most complete, honest answers? And letting people know, like, is texting best? Is a video chat? Is the phone best? Is there a certain time of day when you'll be able to do it? And so thinking through and trying to ask that a couple different ways, to not directly ask, especially if someone's listening on the other line, are you safe? Will somebody be listening? But trying to get around it that way. Is there a certain phone that's the best way to reach you? And so I don't know how much flexibility you have, whether through video or phone, if that's something that you can offer to individuals at El Futuro. But we have found that can be helpful. We have switched one of our clinics to be completely phone-based now. And we found that can actually allow clients a little more autonomy for when they're suggesting or asking that we call them, and how we're asking that we call them. The other thing that we've seen from tips from other organizations is, asking if just kind of casually, like, oh, or where are you meeting today? Can you show me what is in the room? Or can you give me a little video tour? And that can give you that little visual scan of what's happening, and maybe let you know, like, oh, there's somebody else in the room. There isn't. And then that could give you an opportunity to be like, oh, can I see by the window? And that might give you a chance to maybe put in a chat, or maybe quickly hold up some type of sign or something like that of, are you safe? Is this happening? So encourage you to keep it, lighthearted in that moment, encouraging you to ask those questions in a very open-ended way, having those pieces of paper and pen available, thinking about what are some alternative methods to do that. And I encourage you, if there's some other ideas that people are having within the chat, or ways that you've encountered that, please feel free to share that. And Libby, I don't know if you'd add anything.
No, I'm really interested to hear what others are doing. I think this is a big important issue.
Yeah, so if you've had an experience trying to remain discreet while doing this, please unmute and share with us.
And I will just ping that this is a really common question that's happening in a lot of trainings with human trafficking right now. So as you're looking for those more upcoming common trainings, encourage you to be listening for this. I've been on some great sessions where people have been able to offer tips.
Remembering, go ahead, sorry.
No, that's okay. I was just going to say I had to step away for a moment, but one of the things that I have heard of providers using is small things like decoy chapstick or matchbook or business cards that actually advertise something else. Like it might say, it might be for a beauty supply product or something simple that has the number that they may need to call discreetly, that makes it inconspicuous to the trafficker.
Yeah, that's a great point. We know several organizations in North Carolina that are doing that. We also have a card that we offer that has no logo or anything with our number,
right,
as well. So definitely, especially when we're in person, that's a great tool that people have been able to use.
Yeah.
And
I saw,
the,
sorry, go ahead.
sorry, just to reiterate to the hotline, there's a text option as well. Be
Right.
free is the text option.
Mhm.
Yeah. So I'm gonna start to wrap us up because we have a few like end of session today, but just one thing I saw popped up, I guess probably on Instagram or something, but it was like people have like a hand signal. So like you can do it on the video call to let the other person know that you're not safe, but I guess clients have to be aware of, I'm not sure. I think I saw the person do something like this, but I don't want to give misinformation if you all know the specifics on that.
I have not seen a standard hand signal, but I do know things like that are kind of what I'm talking about when we think about every step of the process. So if you're aware when you're doing the scheduling that you're the only, somehow you can tell that it's only one person on the call, there's opportunities to maybe share that in the moments and work things out. I know that I was on one training where it was a youth provider working with victim survivors of human trafficking, and they were able to, through Instagram and a couple other things that she had access to as a case manager, work with each of her clients as the pandemic started to work out what would be the distress signal when they're in a safe moment, so that they can utilize that when they're on video.
Excellent. Libby, if I can ask you to unshare and then I'll wrap us up, but I just wanted to take this opportunity as we're transitioning to say a big thank you to you all and to everyone on the call for these wonderful questions and this conversation. And I think if I can kind of summarize it is, you know, this has been probably our most resource heavy presentation. And I think that's just the nature of this. I think many providers, myself included, you come to a presentation like this thinking like when someone shows up and I think these things might be going on, or as someone mentioned in the call, you know, they maybe weren't aware of the signs. So that's maybe step one. But then once we have an idea that something might be going on, what do we do? And I think you all have shown us that it's really kind of this multi-pronged approach. It requires a lot of resources to get involved. And so it's been really wonderful to share that. But I think, Charissa, you also drove home the point that the human side, the emotional support side is also just as important when working with these folks that are systemically disadvantaged in these situations. So I don't know if folks are on video, but if you can give like a video clap to our presenters today for a wonderful presentation. Thank you all.
Thanks. It was wonderful to be with you.
Thank you. And again, huge celebration of you all. We're very, very thankful. And thank you for that.
Sorry, I think there's a mutual, like so many chats came in. Thank you all for the work that you do. I think people are really appreciative of this important work that you all do. So I want to bring our attention to our next webinar. So we will be covering barriers and how to overcome them for higher ed for the Latinx community. We'll have Dr. Laura Gonzalez from UNCG coming to talk on some of the work that she's done in the community to help folks overcome this. So that's February 26th, 10 to 11:30. Again, we have our prolonged exposure training, so you can find the links to that in the chat, or just send us a message and we'll get you hooked up with that. We also have a COVID survey. Sophia's going to put this in the chat for us. It's a survey where we're trying to gather information from different areas where COVID may be impacting the Latinx community, and it just really helps us with our reporting to government agencies for funding and for helping them to know how to respond. So it takes about 3 minutes or so. If you can help us out by filling that out, we'd really appreciate it. The Futuro staff, remember to clock back in after today's session. And yeah, I just want to thank you all for being here. We love doing these webinars and getting this important info out to you all. So if you liked what you saw today and you want to stay in touch, you can join our network, create a quick little profile at la-mesita.mn.co, and then you're hooked up to all of our programming. That's where we announce all these wonderful training opportunities. It's also a great place to network and find other folks around the state that are doing this work with the Latinx community. So I will wrap us up there. Thank you all so much. Let me stop sharing so we can all see each other. I think at the height, we had 133 people today, which is really exciting. So yeah, thank you all so much. Thank you, Libby, Betsy, and Charissa for this wonderful presentation. And we'll see you all around La Mesquita.
Thanks.
Bye.
Take care.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone.